Welcome to the Mind Sensei podcast. I'm your host, Peter Taz, and I'll be taking you on a journey to the world of martial arts and introduce listeners to some of the most inspiring and knowledgeable practitioners from around the world. Whether you're a seasoned martial artist or a curious beginner, or just enjoy hearing a great story, the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under has something for everyone. So tune in, sit back, and let us take you on a journey through the world in martial arts. Welcome to the Mind Sensei podcast. Today I'm honored to introduce a pillar of the American Kenpo karate group, 7th degree Mr. Larry Kongaika. Born in Tonga, raised in Los Angeles, Mr. Kongaika's journey in martial arts began with boxing, influenced by his father's legacy, before transitioning into Kenpo under the tutelage of Ed Parker's direct students. He was a manager and head instructor at Ed Parker's original Pasadena studio after his passing, and his extensive experience includes assisting run the iconic Long Beach International Championships, and his dedication to Kenpo is matched by his commitment to the internal and spiritual dimensions of martial arts, studying Qigong to deepen his practice. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Larry Kongaika to the Mind Sensei podcast.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. First off, thank you for having me here, and I really appreciate you, us, for being able to host and do these podcasts. It's amazing. I've listened to a couple of the people that you've interviewed, and it's good to just know people. It's just really good to know people.
Yeah.
I appreciate,
The goal is to let people hear stories without having to spend money to travel, right? So let me use the money that I use to share.
Well, you're doing a great job.
All right, let's get started. Let's start off with what inspired you to start practicing martial arts, and how did you choose your particular style? Where to all begin?
Well, you said it earlier. Actually, you made me sound amazing earlier. Thank you. I started martial arts. Really, martial arts is boxing, right? Martial arts is just empty hands. I grew up boxing as a young kid. My dad was a boxer, for Polynesian, and we're a little rough-handed, right? So as we grow up, we misbehave, get smacked around a little bit, and put boxing gloves on us as a very young age, and we grew up boxing. Not only we, myself and my siblings, there's my family, and I'm the oldest boy. There are 3 girls older than me. Whenever there's an issue and we had a problem with anybody or with each other, my dad would throw the gloves, put the gloves on. It actually set an early pecking order for us. And, we're boxing. Even my sisters, they used to beat the tar out of me, Wow, I knew how to throw some quick jabs and crosses. Real basic fundamental stuff, but I grew up boxing and I loved it. I boxed all my life up until like my mid boxing competitions, but we did more, say that is our neighborhood. As I grew up in my neighborhood in LA, we would have other kids come into our neighborhood because they knew that we were like ours known as, hey, gloves on. So our neighborhood kids would come over and they would want to, it's kind of like stuff started back in the 90s. This is even 83, 84. Right? Junior high, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. We grew up on the street. We didn't grow up playing video games. We were out until the lights turned on and we were forced to come home. If we didn't, then that's what we call the laying on of hands. There was no such thing as ADHD. The method, okay, that, like sensitivity is rough-handed. Anyway, neighborhood kids would come in and we would end up boxing them, and we just kind of fight each other all the time. And so it's kind of how we grew up fighting. And as I grew up in LA area, I grew up in Tonga. Well, I was born in Tonga, and then we moved from Tonga to LA at the age of 4. So I grew up pretty much in Los Angeles area, which the greater LA area. And there was a lot of kind of make a name for themselves. My relatives, which were my cousins, lived in LA, which was like Inglewood area, close to the LAX airport. And that's where all the really bads, all the gang activity happened. And we would go there and we would stay there. And I kind of grew up. And by the time we got in a fight, it was always the end of boxing. So I grew up on the streets fighting. We fought. We did, I'm just more like a family thing. But my cousin doesn't live there.
Doesn't sit down with mate.
Right? I'm not a gangster. My wife calls me gangster. I'm not. It was a family thing. Yeah, they were loose, so they were more. So then you had some that were the boys. But anyway, right. So we got into some street altercations, and like I said, everything went back to just scrapping, right? Learning how to fight, learning how to punch, duck, bob, weaving. Kicks were very minimal. There was zero grappling. You didn't want to be on the floor, or that was the number one thing, because it was always more than one person. And that's just kind of how I. And then as I went to high school, in high school, I got in a couple of fights. One of the guys I got in a fight with, Korean, he is doing all these crazy kicks, and I'm like, whoa, this guy. I mean, he's kicks my head, and he's like, what? Doing. Also thinking like, whoa, and I watch, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy's gonna beat the tar out of me. And I block, and and I'm holding him close. There's no way he's gonna be able to kick me. I just knew that, right, as a boxer, and kind of grow. It was my first introduction to Taekwondo, and we became friends, right? Him and I, after we fought, we became friends. And he's showing me how to do these kicks and stuff. This is a tree, like backyard shade tree. With my friends, we're doing kicks. So I'm not that flexible. My kicks are horrible, and then I'm going to throw hands, punch. We got to become pretty good friends. So that was my first introduction to any martial arts. When I say martial arts, I talk about the Asian style, right? But martial arts really is typically just empty hands. And then I met a guy named Jerry Bradford, who was a family friend. Jerry Bradford was a black belt under David German. David German is a Parker black belt. And back then, David German actually started his own style called Budokan Tai. It has then since changed several different American Thai karate. I still call it myself Budokan Tai. A lot of people know who David German is. I think actually Joe Robello was German at one time. He told me he knew David German very well. And so I didn't really get to meet David German so much because I was training with the student Jerry Bradford. But I knew about David German, and I knew about Ed Parker. And what the style we were doing was called Budokan Tai, but I knew that there was some Kenpo, Ed Parker Kenpo in this style. Ironically, Peter, we did all grappling. Everything we did was on the ground. The delayed sword that I have since known, and the 5 swords and the sword of destruction, I had no idea what that was. Everything we did back then, this was when I was in high school. I graduated in 87, so this was like 85, 86. We were doing jiu-jitsu. We were doing on the ground, grappling, choking, flips, throws, judo, jiu-jitsu kind of stuff. And that was my first introduction to martial arts. Well, let's say my Taekwondo, but the reason why I started taking this was because my cousin was good friends with Jerry Bradford, and my sisters were learning from him. So I, being the youngest, just started tagging along and would just start learning, and was learning under this Jerry Bradford. And we would go to a park. It was at a park.
What year was that?
85, 86, 87. And so we would go to this park 2 times a week, and we would just train, and we would do grapple. I told you it was on the ground, most on the ground chokes, cross chokes, grab it, and no gi, no uniform. We were just wearing shirts, grab the shirt, pull it across, like how to do rear naked chokes on the ground, rolling, grappling, that kind of stuff. And so ironically, what was funny is I come to what I know now, we were doing MMA back then, right? We were doing jiu-jitsu and then some boxing, fighting, but nothing. We never did delayed sword. I have never seen delayed sword back then in 86, 87, although it was Budokan Tai, had some Kenpo stuff in it. Our main focus back then in my classes was groundwork. My fighting all went back to my boxing when I was a kid. So whenever I got in any type of fight after that, or any confrontation, and I call them schoolyard fights, Peter. And the reason why I say that is because, you get in a fight as a kid, people aren't looking to try to kill you. They just want to hurt you, right? And they just want to prove a point. Street different. When we got in a street fight, they really wanted to hurt you. When they knocked you out and they were going to try to break your arm, that was a whole different thing. That was LA kind of gang. Or like schoolyard fights with kids in school or whatever, even after school, our neighborhood kids, they didn't want to kill you. They just wanted to prove a point, knock you out, do something. And I categorize schoolyard fight. Then we have street fights. Then we have life and death situation, right? Where your mindset has to be a whole different level. It's about it as well. He just says, you got to have the drunk uncle mentality. We poke the eyes. If you're drunk uncle, you don't want to poke their eye. You don't want to dislocate their arm. It doesn't cause for it. So anyway, going back to Every time I got in a fight back,
The tripping arrow.
tripping, right? That is the answer. So anytime I got any confrontation back then, I had that Budokan Tai I learned, and I also grew up boxing. I always went back to my boxing because I just knew in the street and growing up in LA with my cousins, always in this gang activity, I knew you did not want to be on the ground. So I always stood up and did boxing. Didn't ever, unless you had to be on the ground, you were on the ground. But other than that, I grew up to prevent down. If you go down, your job is to try to get right back up right away. There, what I seen in LA, no joke, started off with 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds fought. The older brother came, and it went from 4 to 8-year-olds to 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds to their parents. And this was in a park, and it was a whole family against a whole family. And it started off with these 4-year-olds. People were bleeding. People were cut across their head because skateboards were flying. It was not just fist fighting. I mean, spatulas, a barbecue are being used as tools, getting stabbed, and whatever was available was what it was like in LA. And we went there. This was a family function of ours, and it ended up becoming this huge fight.
Now, if you invite me to your family barbecue, I'm not coming.
Right. But this is all I'm saying is that it wasn't, I think because where they were raised in LA, they had to learn how to fight, right? And there's a more environment opposed to family. Where they were raised, they had to learn how to fight. And that's kind of how I grew up and learned how to fight and was aware of just fighting abilities and asking what to do. You didn't want to be on the ground. That was one thing I knew for sure. So I always went back to my regular abilities. Hands. Budokan Tai, I learned a lot, but it wasn't anything. I didn't want to go down on the ground. I didn't want to choke people out on the ground. I didn't want to do anything on the ground. So what got me into Kenpo, I had met Mr. Parker's, and we were dating. I had served a mission for my church, came back, met Mr. Parker's daughter. We were dating. And she invited me to the first seminar in the Pasadena studio after it was burnt down. Mr. Parker had just passed away in 1990. She invited me to the seminar because the studio burnt down in October of 1990, right before Mr. Parker passed away. The studio burnt down. Halloween, October 1990. I think Mr. Trejo tells the story because I don't know if I interviewed him, but he knows the story. He tells the story of how it was kind of.
I think it's you listen to the interviews, they'll tell you how smacked around a few gangbangers.
Yeah, I think actually Weidel talks about it too. And so it's about what Idol was training. I heard Russ Idol talk about it. Anyway, the studio burns down in October. Mr. Parker passes away in December. He did not want to rebuild the studio, according to Mrs. Parker, Parker daughter. And at the time, Parker did not want to rebuild the studio. He was just done with it, according to Mrs. Parker. But when Mr. Parker passed away, Mrs. Parker decided she was going to rebuild the studio in honor of her husband and to keep it going. She wanted to rebuild it. And so she took all the insurance money and put it right back in the studio and rebuilt it almost identical, except for the inside. She changed the inside and made it look more modern. It was beautiful. Custom wood, oak looking. The Pasadena studio was, when I say original, this is when Mr. Parker was alive, was a little bit dark. You can see some old footage of him in there. But then the newer studio was nice. It was not bright, and it had nice, clean wood, white walls. Everything was beautifully done. And so when Mrs. Parker had it rebuilt, they had their first Kenpo camp or seminar after Mr. Parker's passing. I want to say it was mid-March in 1991, and I was invited to that. And so I was invited because at the time I was dating the daughter, and I met a lot of the first generation black belts. And honestly, Peter, I had no desire to do any karate, any martial arts. I didn't even care because I boxed. I already knew how to fight. I fought in LA. I didn't need, I felt like I didn't really need, it wasn't any thing that I felt like I needed. And I didn't even care for it. I didn't want to grapple. I didn't want to wrestle. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. And I knew Parker, right? And I knew of Mr. Parker. And so, funny story I'll tell you after I finish this of how I found out my wife back then was actually Mr. Parker's daughter. Let me feel off was in this, I sit there and I'm watching these seminars. And there's over 100 black belts in this studio. The floor was packed. If you've ever been in the Pasadena studio, there's a bench in the back seat. You sit on this bench and you cannot see the instructor in the front because everyone is standing in front of you. all you see is their backs. The floor is packed with Mr. Parker's first generation. This is the first seminar after Mr. Parker passed away at that studio. And the first seminar since that studio was rebuilt. Speakman was there, actually. Speakman did the scissor cutting for the grand reopening of the studio. And this is a 2-day event. And I'm there. I've been there. I'm watching. I must have watched, 5 black belts already teach and instruct. And, I see what, and I'm okay. I'm there to help out, helping out, moving things around, kind of sure they're moving smoothly, putting food out there for them, waters, drinks, whatever. I'm sitting in the back, and one of this guy's teaching. He's up there. He's talking very slow. You can barely hear him. Well, yeah. What? Boom, pop. And I'm just like, I'm sitting in the back, and I'm like, oh my God, what the hell was that? Boom! And I'm just thinking, oh, that's different. And I'm feeling goosebumps, right? And I'm like, what? I couldn't see anything because all I see is people's backs. So on the bench, it's a bench. So I'm looking back, and I can hear people go, ooh, like just kind of ooh expressions. Stand on the bench. And I have to look over everyone to see what's going on in the front. And Paul Mills is up there. I don't know if you ever knew Paul Mills or spoke with Paul Mills, but his demeanor is very self-knowledgeable. But he's up there, and he's he's demonstrating her on her patagims. And what he was demonstrating at the time, he was demonstrating a lot of things. But what caught my eye was I didn't know this then, but he did thundering hammers. And then he counted. He had everyone count. How many strikes do you see on thundering hammers, right? 1, 2, 3, and then the back knuckle, 4, 5 with the edge. He's like, how many strikes do you see here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And everyone's like, well, there's 5 ones. Mills just went through, and he broke down all the different. There was 17 strikes in that thundering hammers that he did, and they were not within just those basic moves. He added 17 complete strikes opposed to just the 5. It was amazing. Strikes above, below, and strikes were, I'm going to say, they were built in the motion. So really what Mr. Mills was talking about at the time, what he was explaining, again, white belt in Kenpo, right? I've taken Budokan Tai. I didn't even care to take anything. But I'm watching him move this stuff, and it was just like thunder and lightning. I was like, this is what I want to learn. And I want to learn from him, right? And that is the whole reason why I started Kenpo, was because of Mr. Mills and what he was demonstrating and how he was explaining it. And I just thought to myself, like, this is effective. What he's showing is highly effective. And that was Kenpo. That wasn't the Kenpo I learned. That had zero Kenpo that I remember back in Budokan Tai, because that's not what we did. And so whenever people ask me, when did you start Kenpo? I don't even tell them about my Budokan Tai days, because I don't even feel like that was, I even learned any increment of Kenpo in it. So Mike started in 91, and that's when I started my Kenpo. And it really knows and speaks highly of him. Speaks so highly of him. I can tell you, he was amazing. And Mr. Mills was fast, and he hit hard. And he didn't have to hit that hard. When you move that fast, his mechanics, his body is so on point. His structure was so incredible. He would barely hit you, and you felt like you got hit by a diesel truck. And just not a diesel truck, like a bullet went through you, and then pop, and then it exploded. And it was the amount of power he could generate. Like, I had to explain it. And when I try to explain it, people look at me like I'm crazy. But Mr. Midafi which demonstrate were all Kenpo principles. They were all Kenpo principles that Mr. Parker, and he would always credit Mr. He never would say, this is what I learned. This is what it was never me. That was I always got from Mr. Mills. Everything he learned, he would always tell me when he learned it and how he learned it and how Mr. Parker explained it to him. Mr. Mills was just able to apply. And I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people have, is the application of Kenpo, right? How to apply it. Mr. Parker knew how to apply a lot of stuff and move. And funny is, Mr. Mills has told me on many occasions, as well as I've heard from other black belts of Mr. Mills, Mr. Parker used to do the same patterns that we work on. Mr. Parker Mr. Mills had a videotape of Mr. Parker doing the same timing patterns and was showing Mr. Mills those patterns. A lot of people get caught up on the speed of it. I was not gonna lie. I was guilty of it. Get caught up with the speed and the dynamics of it and the structure. You have to make sure your body's all in the right anatomical position, structure, because power is a lot of things behind power, but also structure. Your structure has a lot to do with how much power you're able to generate, how are you able to. Mr. Mills, to me, the biggest thing that I got from Mr. Mills was how to transfer that power. Not so much you can generate the power, he generated, but he knew how to power into the person. But he also had very soft hands. As fast as he moved, I thought for sure my neck was gonna break, but he would barely. Honestly, I would explain to my wife, I don't even know how to explain it. His hands felt like pillows. When he would touch you, he would barely. Oh man, there were times where he would tell you too, I'm gonna barely touch you. Wham! And oh my God, he would. I'm not gonna say he would put me on the floor, but there were times if he wanted to, I know my nose would be inverted or my neck would be broke or my chest would be concaved in. But he'd just touch you just enough to get the desired effect. And you would just drop. The guy was amazing. I don't know. I apologize. That's why it got me started in Kenpo. What kept me in Kenpo was what he was able to do and show me, the physics. And that's what kept me in Kenpo. And what got in Kenpo was just how fast he was, the dynamics. What kept me in Kenpo was chasing after the motions of learning how to do it anatomically correct, right? The physics behind it. And to me, that's what Kenpo is really about.
But let's hear the story about how you end up dating one of Mr. Parker's daughters and you're still alive.
That's ironically, I served the mission for my church. I came back. Mr. Parker was Latter-day Saints. And I came back, and my sisters are running, they're in this halau. It's called a halau, or a Polynesian dance group. We're all Polynesian. Mr. Parker's Hawaiian. The daughter would be part of this halau group. The group was actually from New Zealand, and the name of the group was called Te Whanau, which is called the kids or the family. And we would all get together. They were all based, they used to all dance together at BYU, Hawaii. So they would all get together here in California, and they would do all these dance numbers, and we used to perform our culture. It was our culture, and it was important to us. Being Polynesians, it's important for us to be able to learn our culture and share it. And so anyway, my sisters are in group Te Whanau, and I get back, and I'm in this group, and I'm with them, and I'm learning these Inaudi dances, teaching the Tongan culture. Samoans are in there teaching us the Samoan dances, whatever the case may be. And I meet Sherry Parker, which is the youngest daughter, and talking, and we started dating. And so we met. But she invites me to her house, and I go there, and she's like, hey, do you want some sushi to eat? We've been hanging out. Okay, I wasn't a really big fish eater, so we get some food, hang out. I asked her to use her restroom. And she's like, oh yeah, just got in the hallway. You'll run right into the restroom. The door's facing you. So I walked down this hallway, turn on the light. And Peter, no joke, on the side of the hallway, on the right side, it's a wall. And this wall is a love me wall. It's love Mr. Parker, all plaques and accolades of Ed Parker. I turn on the light, I'm like, like I learned Imuda Kantai, Ed Parker. So I'm looking, reading all these of Ed Parker plaques, pictures, pictures. Why do you have Ed on your wall? She's like, that's my dad. I'm going, like, what? I didn't know. Mind you, I just got back from my mission in January. Mr. Parker passed away in December, and I'm there like February. And I didn't know that he had passed away. And I'm like whispered, he here? And she's like, no, he passed away in December. And so I told her, I was like, oh my God. Like, how? Your dad is who? Parker? And so she started explaining to me who he was. I'm like, well, I kind of knew Parker. I didn't know that was your dad. And so anyway, that's kind of how I figured out Parker. Shoot, that was Ed Parker's daughter. And things just went, and that's how I kind of that seminar. Tweakman, at that time, she told me about the Perfect Weapon, which was the movie coming out. And I think that movie was released sometime in March. Not exactly sure when. Maybe late February, March, somewhere around. And that's how I had a speaker. But that's how I got in. That's how I was into the family, married to the family, ended up living at the house, working the IKKA, which is the International Kenpo Karate Association, with Mrs. Parker, helping him work the studio, and also helping run the International Karate Championships, which is the Long Beach IKC. And so, I was making good money, probably 10 grand a month. I was making really good money as a diesel mechanic, but I ended up quitting that job to help Mrs. Parker and just trying to help them out with their family business. And so that's kind of how I entered it. Amazed it. And, I didn't learn a lot until, like I said, after I met Mr. Mills. And I learned more about, after I learned what I learned from Mr. Mills, I learned more about Kenpo from many of the other first generation black belts. Graham Lang, one of them, traveled with Mrs. Parker all over the world. Our owl buddy, we would go and I would help her organize. I looked at it as kind of like we were together a lot. We would go to the East Coast. We would go all over Europe, and I would help her with, talking up his time. I was running the IKKA membership department for the organization. So a lot of times when I would go out, people would be like, "Hey, I sent in this membership, this certificate, blah, blah." And you should just look at me and say, "Well, you need to talk to him." And then I would, whatever, have talked about it, whatever the case may be. So interesting. A lot of politics in Kenpo.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, big problem,
Let's first, Jerry. So how far? Yes, you got to your first degree with him. Is that right?
I did, yes.
Okay.
And, people and I have this black belt. Okay, that's what I park. It was studio, we uniforms. We were at the I didn't really know what studio was like until I got to Pasadena studio. Pasadena studio, it's a studio, it's a business. You go in there, there's floors, there's mats. You wear a uniform, you have a belt. You're wearing that belt until you get your next belt and so forth. That's not how this training was, right? But now I look at it, a lot of the training was. That's how a lot of the kung fu trainings. There are masters that train at the park in Buena Park here in LA. And these are masters that actually are like, there's in their system. They go to the park and they're doing Tai Chi, Wushu, they're doing whatever they're doing, training at the park. And I didn't know that, And my image of training at the park was like I did shape tree, but it is training. And so I did attain my black belt back then. And I don't really claim it. I don't say anything because like I said, I feel like it's shade tree. I've talked to Mr. Stephen Russell, and he's like, well, that's how it was back then. He's the one who kind of made me. I know Cagliandro said the same thing on her podcast where she didn't feel good about her black belt, her first initial black belt. I think she said she kind of had issues accepting it or whatever the case or how she got it. That's kind of how I felt that black belt back then, not the skinny belt in Kenpo where I felt like there was really more structure, more the difference between junior college and an actual, college. Because we're comparing, Kenpo was like the Ivy League of college.
Homeschooling and actual school, right?
Exactly. Learning about homeschooling, actual regimen kind of learning.
So from they met or started dating, and where did your journey take you from there? So
so I met her invited the actual first, and that's when I met Mr. Mills, and that's where from there, that's after I met Mr. Mills. Okay, at the camp, I actually, we weren't married, I was dating, and I told her, I said, look, I would like to take this, your dad's Kenpo, but I want to learn if that guy, right? So I've been introduced to many of the first generations. Mike Pick was there, John's up there. A lot of Bob Lyles was there. A lot of these guys were there. I can't tell you all of them because I was a newbie with new eyes, right? Fresh eyes. I just met whatever Paul Mills was doing was what I wanted to learn. And because I saw how effective and how dynamic he was moving, his motion. I wanted to learn his motion is really well under Earth. So it's really what, after being in many altercations in the street, LA, right, growing up, and seeing what he was doing, I felt like that is stuff that would be highly effective in being able to see, through my growing up in the streets, growing up in LA, and there I had to meet a Paul, and Paul, oh sure, yeah, anytime, come on. He's from Wyoming. Come on, let's say, come on up. We be help my, and so what I told him was, I said, Mr. Mills, I said, I'm going to learn and I'm going to start here in Pasadena and I'm going to get my fundamentals and my basics here. And then when I get green belt, I'm going to start learning from you. Okay. Something with not knowing anything, wanted to have good, solid fundamentals. And so Paul Mills was my instructor. My very first instructor in Kenpo was Tommy Chavis. Okay, I was in Pasadena. Tommy Chavis was the one who was teaching the beginner in some of the advanced classes. Frank Trejo was there in Pasadena, and he was the head instructor. But the one and Frank would get out there and teach. But the one who actually did most of the teaching at the time was Tommy Chavis. And Tommy at the time, Mr. Chavis, was a 5th degree black belt. At the time, Mr. Trejo was a 7th degree black belt. And then we also had many first generations there. Howard Silva would come in and out. Dave and George would come out and teach. We had a lot of people come in and out of that studio. It being, kind of the Pasadena studios. You had the Pasadena, which was the very first. Then you had Santa Monica, which was the other studio in LA, like LA. To me, the Pasadena studio was kind of the Santa Monica had a lot of his first generation black belts came out of that Santa Monica studio under Larry Tatum. And so you had almost like two different of cultures. Pasadena had a lot of what they did, but if you were to ask me what black belts came out of Pasadena, they are not the first generation black belts that you see that Larry Tatum was producing. Larry Tatum had a lot of black belts coming out of Santa Monica and a lot of like a level, Muhammad Tabata, Tanaka, or was another one was out there in the Santa Monica. There's a lot of them. Bernie George, a lot of them was up in that area. But the Pasadena, they would all come through Pasadena and they would all teach and kind of help. So it was weird, almost like two different types of cultures. They were brother schools, but one just flourished so much more as far as like business wise, was almost there. Wise was struggling, but because it was reversed. And Mr. Parker kept it, and Trejo was running it at the time. So I was training in Pasadena, and it was basically under Tommy Chavis, Frank Trejo, and Paul Gerard. Those were the main instructors that would come in there, and then when Atlanta that would come in and teach guest instructors would teach. And so I knows me, Chavis, incredible Kenpoist. Now we know a little bit under Ron Chappelle, but also under Steve Sanders or Steve Muhammad. And the thing about Tommy Chavis, he could move Kenpo, how to make Kenpo work. He was very fluid, and his fighting skill mimicked a lot of Steve Sanders. So his were very fluid and very methodical, everything had purpose. Even in his sparring and fighting, everything had purpose. He had a lot of the principles and a lot of the concepts within the techniques, and then and also applied within the sparring. And so really, I learned a lot of good basic fundamentals, a lot of good solid foundation from the Pasadena studio under Tommy Chavis, Frank Trejo, Paul Gerard, and those guys. So, and that's where I go there, and I got to my green belt in Pasadena, and they knew at the time, so I was a fiance of the Parker daughter. I was a fiance, so they all treated me like family, and they would help me out as much as they can and share, do whatever. Of course, some people would joke around with me and kind of set where, at least maybe, I would add a train work, can you leaping crane or teach me leaping crane to one of the black belts? Hey, why don't you ask Mr. Trail? Mr. right there, oh, and can you please show me leaping crane? Throw the punch. And I'm like, punch or straight punch? Me, right? I'm leaping crane purple belt. I'm an orange belt. I throw the punch. Wham, Mr. Trail. Got Mr. Trail. Wham, full on hits me. Pop, kicks, pop, boom, wham, I'm on the ground. Oh, thank you, sir. And I look at it, I salute, and I walk away with my tail in between my legs, right? The guys I asked originally, and they're the ones who sent me to Mr. Trail. They're laughing. And I'm walking away, and they're laughing, and I walk up to them. I'm like, you guys set me up. And they're like, yeah, it's pretty fun. Sorry, but when he doesn't want to show you anything, he's going to hit you to teach you. Don't ask, right? Not the time to ask. So Mr. Trail, full on. I'm not going to say he gave it 100%. It was probably a good 50, 60% nudges in there. And it caught me in the rib, caught me in the kidney, caught me in the head. Luckily, not so hard. Got up anyway. I learned leaping crane from the other guys. They're like, did you land? Oh, I felt it, but I didn't learn anything.
You don't get to see much if you throw the punch. FYI.
Yeah. Anyway, that's how I learned a lot of my basics in the Pasadena studio. And once I got my green belt, Peter, I bought my ticket I was married already, living at Parker house, Parker's books. Mind you, Mr. Parker's office was downstairs. I sat at his desk. I sat at his computer. I would read his notes. I had access to all his books. He had his Infinite Insights volume 1 through 5. He had sticky notes inside each one that he would adjust or alter or fix this, There's 2 books of his Infinite Insights when they reprint and whatever makes them. He had all that in his, and I had videotapes, VHS videotapes. So people would just send him VHS videotapes. Matter of fact, I'm watching these VHS videotapes and, true story. I'm watching it and find a Bruce Lee videotape, right? Bruce Lee sidekicks. Abdul-Jabbar holding the bag, holding this big, huge Bruce Lee's doing these sidekicks in a backyard, teaching Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and on this VHS tape. And then on as well, doing a kick on the side, on a hanging bag in a backyard patio. I'm guessing it's his patio. I don't know whose patio it is, but he's kicking this bag. It's swinging. And, Bruce this videotape Parker. Well, apparently it wasn't Bruce Lee that gave it to him. It was Bruce's brother gave Mr. Parker this videotape. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Bruce's brother was the one who filmed it. It wasn't Mr. Parker that I saw someone, Mr. Parker got this tape, but it was Bruce's brother that filmed it. And, whenever Bruce had away, the brother came to the house and was asking for any pictures or any documentation of Mr. Parker and Bruce. The brother came to the house and I met him and he was talking to Mrs. Parker and I was like, oh, I said, Mom, because I used to call her Mom, there's a video, your Parker and that sent, not with them together in it, but that he had sent. And the brother was like, really? And I'm like, yeah. So I pull out tape and I give it to Mrs. Parker because it's not mine to give away. I give it to her and she watches it and, she's looking at it and she's like, never seen this before, And sure enough, where did he get that tape? I don't know. It's not mine. Mr. Parker's. It was in his library of videotapes. And so he asked for it and we made a copy and gave it to him. He's like, I filmed that. That was me filming this. He's like, I don't even got, because he didn't even have a copy of this. And so we made a copy of it, gave it to him. It was funny. Was a lot of that footage came out after I gave it to him. A lot of that footage came out that he had released with his, I think the family, Linda Lee and him weren't really communicating or didn't really get along too well because I think that he was leaking money off of his brother. Lee didn't really like it, like this, whatever. I don't know, whatever the case, we didn't know. They were doing a documentary on Bruce, so we gave it to him but they ended up releasing a lot of that footage and then we started seeing it on the internet. Yeah. And so a lot of the Bruce doing the 1-inch, the internationals, I was the one who gave that to the brother. And then that started coming out on a lot of the social media stuff. And so it was, anyway, Mr. Parker had a library of VHS videotapes of a lot of people. People would just send him videotapes. Another one I saw was Larry Tatum, Mr. Parker teaching Larry Tatum Form 7 with the double knives in his backyard. In his porch, in Mr. Parker's backyard, underneath it was kind of his porch area, and that butter knives, and he's this. Mr. Parker is teaching Larry Tatum, regular clothes, private, out there in his backyard, Form 7, which I've heard many Form 7. He was working on it back then, but look how long. I'm watching this videotape. I'm thinking to myself, man, when did Larry Tatum actually get the axe, right? When did he get cut? What year was that? I don't know, but so I was working on this Form 7 before Larry Tatum actually got this axe or this cut, and he was working with Larry Tatum on this Form 7. And, when I'm looking at it, I'm being finger set, finger set with the long blade, finger set with the short blades. And I'm like, because I'm a lower belt, I'm like, I think I was a purple, blue, green belt maybe at the time I'm watching this. I'm like, oh, that looks like finger set. And he's in a horse stance and Larry Tatum's doing this. Then Larry Tatum starts moving the front, doing something. And I'm thinking, and this is double knives. I wonder if this is Form 7 everyone keeps talking about, right? And this was on videotape at the Parker house. But from what I understand, that was Mr. Parker working on Form 7. That was going to be Form 7. Then he changed it and made it a knife set and then created Form 7 from that knife set and made it a little bit more dynamic. And so I don't know. I've just been hearing other black belts tell me about it, but I know Larry Tatum was the first one. So Form 7 was never really set in stone. Like, when I say that, he didn't written out, he had Form 6 clubs, and he had for literally Form 7, he just had a general axes. Oh, sorry, bad.
Sevens. 7 was knives. Then they moved it to 8 because they created the stick form when Larry had the running with the Eskrima component. And he said, we already do sticks. And then he said, we already have a form. And that's how it came to be. I don't know if that's but he had a visitor come to his studio wanting to teach sticks. And Mr. Tatum said, we already do sticks. Thanks. We got it covered. And we do a form. And then Parker said, what's this form that we do? I guess you want me to create it. He goes, correct.
Yeah.
And then they ditched him around.
So 6, I'm getting confused. This is actually 6, right? And so there was a 6. It's not 6.
The flower savant, flower, counterbalance form, add form, depends on who you talk to.
It depends on all weapons, right? All weapon attacks. Anyways, so 6 is the flower form, the weapon attack. 7 is the clubs, right? And working the clubs, and then 8 is actually the knife. So from what I understand from some of the black belts, put it together from Mr. Parker back then, but there was a video of actually Parker teaching Larry Tatum these double knives. And I watched Larry move, and the guy moves knives incredible, and what he does with it is incredible, following the principles, blade over blade, bringing it around. But all I'm saying is there was a lot of stuff at Mr. Parker's house, right? Mr. Parker in his office, I had access to all this stuff. And I was young. I'm a newbie. I'm a belt, right? So a lot of it was over my head, didn't really understand. But I knew Mr. Parker had a couple of books that he never wanted to release, or he was very skeptical about releasing. Speak with the Knife was one of them. Speak with the Club and Kenpo in the Streets. Those are, I don't know, have you heard of those books?
Speak with a Knife wasn't released. He didn't want it in the end.
So he didn't want to wrap because he felt like that was too much liability. It's understood from Mrs. Parker and the family. If you're familiar with the O.J. Simpson case here in L.A.?
Everyone knows O.J.
So what they did with that, they said it was passionate. Whatever the attack was passionate because there were so many stab wounds, but they were describing some of the motions on it, and it was the way they described it almost sounded like Kenpo. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm positive it wasn't, but almost sounded like a Kenpo, a way to kind of use leveraging and how some knives would stab and leverage and fulcrum out or whatever the case, the coroner or whoever described it. I was just thinking, oh man. But they said it was definitely a passionate or someone who had some part into it. It was a passionate killing, whatever the case is. But the studio being burnt dead, it wasn't arson, but it was passionate because they took the time to take all the pictures off the wall and stack them in 3 different piles in the studio and lit those piles up on fire. And so they were like, for someone to take the time to do all that, they were upset of some revenge or some sort of passion behind it. So interesting is it's just, again, add access to all the plethora of information of Mr. Parker's stuff. And I was there at the house. Ed Jr. was there. I had to talk to Ed. I was part of the traveled with Mrs. Parker. Got to see a lot of the people, a lot of the black belts, a lot of the first generations. And and everybody's great in doing Kenpo. One of the biggest things I learned in Kenpo, Mr. Toss, was the different styles in Kenpo.
Yeah.
I know that we've had camps, and even at the first camp, the biggest argument that I heard was, that's not what Mr. Parker taught me. Oh, is it wrong? And now looking back at because everyone feels like their way is the correct way. But now looking back at what I know, Mr. Parker kind of created division because he taught people to abilities and he taught people to what they were good at and what they tend to gravitate to or what they liked. Right. And is their Kenpo wrong? It's wrong. It's just their version of Ed Parker's Kenpo.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I saw all these different branches of Kenpo. It's Mr. Parker's version. It's all these different people's versions of Ed Parker's Kenpo.
I think Edmund put it well. When I came out, we became very good friends. And I actually went because he'd in the Parker house, and we went to Pasadena. We were sitting on the back porch that you were talking about, chatting away. We had to run inside because the skunk showed up. But it's a different story. He was saying with my dad, someone asked my dad very specific with things, and he didn't like silly questions. When he said, Mr. Parker how do you do 5 swords? They wouldn't say, what is the current way or the correct way of us doing 5 swords to the written material or something like that. He was very specific with his answers. And they'd say, how do you do? And he would say, well, how do you do 5 swords? And they would do their version. And what he would do is he would correct it and fix it with the principles and concepts. And he'd go, and then they would turn around and say, no, this is the way you do swords because Ed Parker taught it to me that way. And like you said, he just worked on individuals' styles and different ways they were doing it. Because once you've been around, more than one way to do it, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And then he does. Mr. Brown says, there's many ways to come up with that number 4. You're thinking about mathematical equations, bases, 2 plus 2, right? 1 minus or whatever, 5 minus 1 is 4. There are many ways to come up with that number, that figure 4, that number 4. And so there's not one correct way. There are many ways to get from point A to point B. And I think that you're right. And Edmund Jr. was spot on. And that's the one thing you'll hear about Mr. Parker is he was very specific. I didn't know the guy. I didn't meet him. But just through talking to people, he was very specific in what he said and how he said things. And whether they were good or bad, it didn't have that bad negative, right? Like I heard people say, well, you can't go wrong with this instructor. And other black belts would look at him and go, what? Why would you say that? He's like, well, I didn't say you can go right with him either, right? So he was very cautious with how he worded things. He didn't want to say something bad, but he, in the same sense, didn't want to say something good that was going to give this guy the credit due to him that he didn't deserve, whatever the case is. So he was very particular in how he worked it and what he said. And I think with the techniques was the same way. He did. Frank Trejo had his way of techniques, and I knew that right off the bat. Learning under Frank Trejo in Pasadena, then going to learn from Paul Mills, the dynamics were different, but the core was the same. And so, now my Kenpo has become big bits and pieces from everyone. Paul Mills being my core, Ed Parker, learning Ed Parker's principles and concepts, reading the books, kind of getting the knowledge from him, picking brains from everyone else, Skip Hancock, John Sapove, Roy McDonald, all from all over the world. And I get to talk to them, see them, see exactly what you do. How do you do this technique? And if it's something I liking, then I'll add it. If it's not something I don't like, then I won't add it. But I always try to the basic core values of Kenpo. How does it apply? Does this sense? Logic? Does it, like if I'm in the face, am I going to try to hit you in the face again? No, everything is about feeding, right? Learning how the body mechanics work. And so if I'm going to hit your face and I'm going to hit you in the face again, I'm going to try to hit the body or the stomach to come back to the face. So utilizing logic, utilizing the body mechanics and the concept of manipulation without having to chase my targets is kind of how I keep my Kenpo or try to focus on my Kenpo and keeping it dynamic. Just Kenpo's got to be fast and it should end. Although we do techniques that are whatever, 10, 15, maybe moves, the first 3 has got to be your bread and butter. I think the first 3 has got to be your bread and butter.
I think you hit on it because I was talking with my instructor, which is coming out very soon, part 2, and we talked about entry is 90%. Without entry, forget the rest, right? So you really got to, and he sort of said, you got to get past that and you have to react and get past the first part, and then you get on. And then it's what you keep saying to my students from what I've learned, learn the techniques, you learn extensions. Because if I'm doing delayed sword and there's 2 guys or 3 guys, one's getting a kick, one's getting a block, the other one's like, I'm spreading the love, right? And I'm going,
Right.
when you've got to go, right. So the techniques we learn, you're not going to apply them all on the same person. You might need to share them, is what we say, right?
Right, laying of the hands, exactly. That's a whole nother concept, right? We talked about that today, the sword or 5 swords. I may start off with a block chop, I poke this guy, back knuckle that, and hit another guy, right? So, like you said, spread the love, the gaseous state of motion. And so it's all concepts. It's all how do you apply. And the concepts are super important, but the application to me is the most important. How do you apply it? Because we can talk conceptual all day, but it's putting those concepts into motion. It's making it work. And that's the number one key thing. Right, Graham's right. Every Kenpoist knows it, but no one really addresses it. It's the entries. How do you enter center line? And then not only that, but choosing your enter. Do I choose to go in between his center line where I have to now worry about his right and his left? Or do I choose to be on the outside or the outside? Let me start in between and then work my way back on the outside. So it's the entries. Entries are key. I always tell people, start off with that wedge. We got that wedge. You can start off with that wedge right into shield and mace. Here's that. A lot of times, shield and mace is a great one. I learned it when I first I learned this like bob and weave. Step, bring that hand up vertical, and then turn. So it's like a bob and weave. It's like we're dipping, ducking, and that's I learned that in boxing. Side step and dip, duck, punch. Right. Then I've learned it with the thrusting wedge.
It blew your mind. Just said you're just doing thrusting wedge, right? What?
Yeah, exactly. And then when people are saying, "Look at the wedge," it's thrusting wedge, same thing. But then you're right when you get there, instead of doing that elbow, you're going to drop into that punch, hammer, kick, claw. And I'm like, what? Yeah. But man, that wedge, thrusting wedge is nothing more. Shilling hammer, nothing more. Lower block, that thrusting wedge, it's that structure, right? So it's the structure. It's that where the structure of how our body alignment is, the triangle, 135-degree angles, right? So all that is all about structure. How do you win? And the outward parries. One of the things, I don't know if you interviewed Tommy Burks. Have you interviewed Tommy Burks?
Yeah. No, not yet.
No. So Tommy, good martial artist out in Texas. He has a lot of stories about Mr. Parker. One of the stories that sticks with me of Mr. Parker is like, Mr. Parker, I have a problem with this technique. Mr. Parker told him, well, what's the problem? He's like, well, I can't seem to make this part of this technique work. He's like, doing the technique. He's like, we adjust it to make it work. He's like, I can adjust it to make it work. And Mr. Parker told him, then what's the problem, right? What's the problem? The necessary adjustments for you, right? To make whatever you need to make work, make those adjustments. And again, how do you enter? Some people like to enter with the double parries, right? Or double parry, hit, punch, hammer, hit. Some people like that single wedge. And then, like that outward parry. And those are just the entry factors of how you get inside. But really, when you enter, it's really about protecting your center line and destroying their center line.
I'm your host, Peter Taz, and you've tuned in to the Mind Sensei podcast from Down Under. We want to take a moment to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the Mind Sensei podcast. We appreciate your support and hope our show has been both informative and entertaining for you. If you haven't already done so, we would like to invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. Finally, we'd like to thank our guests for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Without their generosity, this podcast would not be possible. Thank you again for listening to the Mind Sensei podcast Down Under. We hope that you continue to join us on this journey through the world of martial arts.